everyone! Welcome to week 6. Holy smokes. Wow. Time really does fly. It's hard to believe that this is already week 6 upon us. So we're moving into more and more history. Last week you guys kind of had an exploration of what life was like, or the pressing issues that occurred after the Civil War. A lot of them having to do with Reconstruction, black codes, Jim Crow. Hopefully these are things you all understand better. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk a little bit about after Reconstruction, so 1875, all right? And also really a little bit of stuff still going on after the Civil War. But we're going to talk about how America's industrializing. So prior to the Civil War, most Americans live on farms. Like a lot, meaning like 80+% of Americans live on farms, and they farm, and they live in the same village, and they're born in the same village that they die in. You know, that's how a lot of Americans live. But really, starting with the Civil War and moving through the period of time we're going to be talking about, things change to the point where in a 50-year span of time, from 1865 to say 1920, after the 1920 census, I believe it recorded for the first time more Americans live in cities than on farms. So we go from 80% of America on farms to 50% or less of America on farms. So obviously there's a lot going on, but what is transforming America so fundamentally? And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the transformation from an agrarian to an industrialized one, all right? So some basic questions here. Let's move on. Wondering questions. Imagine life in 1879. Was it the same? No! You don't have to tell me this, but think about it. How is life different in 1879, say, to today? Like, radically different, I hope. I mean, no phones, no lights, no running water, no way of quick communication, really. They had telegraphs, but those are just coming online, right? Life is super different. No cars or highways or planes or super fast boats. None of that, right? No internet. You had to go to the library to learn anything. Or school. So let's look at some pictures. Ooh. Ah. Oh. That's a phone, by the way. Ah, light bulb. Ooh. That's a early form of harvesting crops. A telegraph machine. All right, yeah. So this is how America's going to change. In early America, obviously, America was an agrarian nation, meaning that most people lived on farms or in small villages. The Industrial Revolution changed the nation's economy and affected the way people lived. As the nation industrialized, people began to move to bigger cities in search of new jobs and a better way of life. The movement of people from rural areas to cities is often known as urbanization. So, during this time, there's also what we call a rise in corporations. One of the main factors in industrialization in the United States was its economic system of capitalism. Under this system, capital, or money, is controlled by individuals. You, the people. When we talk about American history, you can find a lot that's motivated by money, sadly. Investors risk their money in business, all right, that they will believe give them the most profit. Consumers are free to choose what they do and do not want to buy. So before the Civil War, U.S. businesses were owned by individuals or by a group of partners. After the war, corporate business became more common. Corporation is a company chartered by a state and reorganized in law as a separate thing. A corporation issues shares to investors, also known as stocks, making each shareholder a partial owner. Stock owners share the corporation's profits in the form of dividends. The corporate form of business made it possible for many people to pool their money together. So where it may have been hard to start a business before because you simply didn't have the money, you could pull 100 people together and form a corporation and start a business. Coal mines, railroads, factories, ironworks all required lots of money to get started, and the advantage of a corporation was its ability to just find vast sums of money quickly. So, industrialization proceeded at a rapid pace in the decades after the Civil War. Some historians consider this period of America's history as the Second Industrial Revolution. There's a lot going on here. Natural resources provided sources of energy and raw materials for agriculture and manufacturing. The development of new ways of to use existing resources stimulated economic change. Coal and water power are examples of these. Also, during this time, you have the rise of steel, stronger metal. By the late 1800s, technology decreased steel's cost and increased its quality. With plentiful iron ore deposits around Lake Superior, places like Ohio emerged as the nation's center of heavy industry and steel production. After the Civil War, the nation's steel industry grew so fast that the United States became the world's largest economy, making steel. Strong as steel. Woo-woo. The introduction of the steam age also transformed the iron industry and railroad industry. The key to the nation's industrialization was the growth of its railroads. In 1869, the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad connected the nation from east to west. I could now get on a train in Baltimore and go to San Francisco. Railroads affected just about every aspect of American life. They brought people from the east to the new frontiers of the west. It made it possible to move food from farms and goods from factories to big factories in faraway cities. Picture of an old-timey train. Choo-choo. So between 1830 and 1861, railroads grew so rapidly that there were almost 30,000 miles of railroad put down. Also, if you're building more railroads, you're using more iron, and if you're using more iron, people are making more iron. So that means that they need more iron factories, which means more jobs, which means this is all a big circle. New inventions also helped fuel economic expansion and change the way we lived our lives. These new changes allowed people to live a different standard and in a different way. One of the newest technologies was the Bessemer process, which replaced how we produced steel. It used to take an entire day to produce 5 tons of steel. Now, thanks to the Bessemer process, we can produce 5 tons of steel in 15 minutes. Which means over an entire day, you could produce 100 tons of steel plus at a factory. Literally, times 5, times 6, times 7, times 8, times 10 more. Also, steam power, choo-choo. So steam affects more than just railroads. We're talking about steam boats and boats powered by steam engines. No more sails, ladies and gentlemen. It also drove the equipment in the machines that were used to make products. Mass production. We'll talk about this later. But using machinery and steam-powered engines to make the machines move, factories began producing all types of goods. And factory goods were mass-produced so that all the goods produced were the same. As industrialization spread, more and more goods were made in the factory. As a result, people began buying more mass-produced goods rather than making them all by hand. And if you're not making stuff by hand and it's being quicker and more efficient and faster, then it's cheaper. And if things are cheaper, then you can have more of those things. Petroleum. Petroleum, guys. We're talking about oil. Black gold, as they call it. Improvements in refining allowed petroleum products to be used in providing lighting and machine lubrication, and they eventually powered gas-powered engines for cars and some of the first airplanes. Look at that car. I have one of those at home. Not really. So, electricity. Yes, electricity. Benjamin Franklin's kite finally got put in the walls. No, not really. But, the application of electricity was significant. For its commercial use, electricity was used as a means of communication along telegraph wires. For those of you that don't know what I mean by telegraphs, I'm talking about Morse code. Beep 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 beep. Basically, yeah, you could spread messages using Morse code in seconds across the country. And in 1876, this very angry man, no, he probably wasn't angry, Alexander Graham Bell, created the telephone, allowing people to communicate by voice across great distances. In this photo here, I believe he's literally talking to somebody in the room next door. So, in 1879, Thomas Edison, who actually was a jerk in real life, from what I know, invented the light bulb. It took him literally hundreds of tries to make this light bulb. Obviously, light bulbs changed the way we live. No more candles or gas-powered lamps. You can now light your home with electricity. And of course, the telegraph. This is the picture of the beeping I just made. This thing, that hammer comes down, and it goes beep, 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 to transmit messages using Morse code across great distances. People used to communicate scores of baseball games, results on the battlefield in seconds using just this tiny machine here to communicate messages along electrical wires. Also, farming became mechanized. Ooh, farming. All right, for most of the U.S. history, growing crops was a matter of human sweat, hard back-breaking labor, working when the sun comes up, and not stopping till the sun goes down. Until, God willing, a man named Cyrus McCormick invented the reaper, which is this thing, a horse-drawn machine used to harvest grain. Before this invention, farmers cut all their crops down by hand, using a scythe. McCormick's invention helped spark an absolute revolution in agriculture. And this is why less people started working on farms. It used to be farms needed men to work on the fields, to cut down the crops, to sow the fields. It was a laborious job that took lots of people. Once you mechanized it, you didn't need as many people to farm a field, and it didn't take as long. Meaning there were simply just less farming jobs available. And this concludes our lecture on how society would change as far as technological innovation that would move our country from an agrarian nation to an industrialized one. In the span of 50 short years, most Americans go from living on farms to half or greater living in towns and cities. All right, guys. Good luck on the rest of your stuff this week. If you have any questions, please email me at ksearcy@spartan.lymancityschools.org. Please respond to the discussion board that goes with this lecture. Thank you.